Welcome to the Hearts Entwined podcast. In this podcast, we'll be having discussions around the secrets which attract lasting, healthy, fulfilling relationships, creating a healthy mindset, and what women should know and understand about men. Introducing your host, Lynn Smith, the Queen of Hearts, relationship expert, trainer, speaker, and best-selling author of the Cupid's Bow technique. Lynn's mission is to have a positive impact in reducing divorce, domestic violence, and suicide.
Welcome to the Hearts Entwined podcast. This is your host, Lynn Smith. And today, listeners, I've got a returning guest, Maxine Clancy. And thank you so much, Maxine, for joining me on our Hearts Entwined podcast today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, Lynn. I'm excited to be here.
Well, Maxine, you're a relationship coach, and specifically, I suppose, around finding love after divorce is your area of specialism, so to speak, isn't it?
Well, both. I mean, I literally help people to heal that divorce that they've been through. So I'm a specialist divorce coach. And yes, finding love after divorce is another area of my speciality. So I'm all about love.
Yeah, me too. So we decided off air that it'd be good to talk about how to activate your power and radiance. So what specifically do you actually mean by that for the benefit of the listeners?
Yeah, that's a great question. So so there's two aspects of it, like your power and your radiance. And I think often when we hear the word power, we often confuse that with, masculine pushing and strength. And I'm talking about your internal source of energy and creative power, spirit, divine source, pure love. It's that aspect of everybody that is deeply sort of embedded into their whole, our whole system. And it's how we live from emotional power, spiritual power, mental power, and also like the physical power, the energy we have in our body, the life force that flows through us, and how we are deeply connected to it. So that is, to me, the more we are connected to our life force, our energy, our vibrancy, our light, our spirit, our source, that is your radiance. And the more you're connected to it, the more your presence you have within yourself, and you're going within in order to create your life, to have mastery over your life, to have joy, etc., then that creates a radiance. It creates a magnetism within you that allows you to be in the flow as opposed to the push, the pull side of life. And so that's what to me, your power and radiance is all about.
So Maxine, if I'm understanding you right, then for the benefit of our listeners, would you say it's more about getting out of your head and your thinking brain and mind, and more in touch with your intuition and connecting with your heart?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's not to say you don't use your mind and your brain, but it's really being in your heart, listening to your heart, listening to that higher power within you, that higher your inner guidance, your intuition, your inner guidance. So yes, absolutely, Lynn.
Okay, so how do people, if somebody's new to this concept, how do people sort of start that process?
Okay, yeah, great question. So I think what's really important is to first of all talk about what gets in the way of it, and why is it that we are so often, not everybody, but we can be disconnected, or even like when we've been on this path of listening to our more spiritual side of us, our intuitive side, how easy it is to get distracted. And what I've sort of discovered in all my work, and I've been coaching for 25 years. So I trained originally as a psychotherapist in spiritual-based psychotherapy. I was a bereavement counselor. And then I sort of went into the world of coaching. And it really is our stories that trip us up. Everybody has a story. And so particularly, around love and relationships and divorce, everybody's got a story about what happened to them and what is wrong with them and why they can't have what they want, or what's wrong with me. I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. I don't deserve to be loved. I need to be perfect to be loved. All these different types of beliefs, and really the sort of definition, the way we define ourselves. So when someone's going through a divorce, they often define themselves as a failure, which is completely wrong, because all relationship experiences are an opportunity for growth, and to heal ourselves. And so what I really think is that the stories trip us up, they keep us stuck. And in addition to that, I really do believe that most of us are afraid of our power. Like, Marianne Williamson said, in her famous quote that Nelson Mandela used in his inauguration speech, is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us, because we really are afraid of how powerful we could be, and how that breaks up the dynamics of families, etc., etc. So, anyone who wants to create anything, I know you're a specialist in helping people to find love and helping people find their soulmates. If someone wants to find their soulmate, what is the story that's stopping you from doing that, from creating that?
Absolutely. Like you say, there is a tendency for us to live in our past, isn't there, and be a victim of that sometimes, rather than knowing that, what's happened in the past is what's happened in the past. You're not the same person you are today as what you were even yesterday, let alone years ago, when any challenge or trauma affected how you viewed things. So it is about taking on that realization, and that whatever you believed in the past can change if that belief or those beliefs don't serve your greater good today.
No, and you see, this is the thing, Lynn. I mean, I'm sure you find it, with people you work with as well, and even ourselves. I know that in the past, we as humans, we don't like change. We want to know what's going to happen tomorrow. And I was thinking about this morning, actually, on my walk in the park, because I walk in Richmond Park. And there was this one time when I first used to walk in the park. I didn't know the park very well, and so I kind of would keep to the same track and the same path. And in Richmond Park, where I live just on the outskirts in London, and there's lots of deer in the park. And recently, it's been the mating season. There's been an awful lot of deer, and you literally wouldn't know when you were going to come across one. And there's some big ones with big antlers, etc., etc. And so when I first started walking the park, I would stick to the same path because I knew it and it was safe. And this is the thing. We want to know. Our ego wants us to know and wants us to be safe, and we want to know what's around the corner. And I remember there was this point when I used to go over this sort of this particular bit of the sort of woods, and there'd be all the trees, and it was a really, really misty morning. And I was felt quite scared. I didn't know what was beyond the mist. I didn't know if there was going to be some big gigantic deer with antlers, etc., etc. And like when you're in the mist, when you're driving in the fog or anything like that, there's that bit of you that has to get to the point where you've got to keep going, and then a little bit more is revealed, and you keep going, you see a little bit more, and the mist clears as you're moving forward, doesn't it? Intuition is like that. Listening to your guidance is like that. And we have to have the courage to keep moving forward. And so, when we're talking about our power, one of the essence qualities that comes with really truly activating our power is aligning ourselves with spiritual courage. And like it's an essence that's in everybody. Like we have all the qualities, and this is what I loved about, I trained as a psychotherapist, and the training that I studied was transpersonal psychotherapy, and it comes from a very simple premise that everything you need is already in you. It's like part of your design plan, your divine plan, your divinity. You just have to activate it. And so this is what happens. Life is always going to give us opportunities which look like crisis, opportunities that are the surprises that we don't want, that we don't like, as an opportunity for us to evolve and to grow and activate the qualities within us that maybe are a little bit asleep. And so that's how I see, activating our power. It's an opportunity for us to drop the resistance to change in our life and really listen and learn to have faith and trust in that inner guidance and that inner power that is there already, but we've learned to numb it.
Couldn't agree more. I loved your mist or fog analogy. The further forward you go, the more is revealed, and it's getting comfortable with the uncomfortable, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Necessary.
Yeah. And so what happens, when I work with people, and like this whole thing about your power and your radiance, they go together. Yeah. And what we tend to do is we dim down our radiance, we make it dull, and we do that through so many things, whether it's through watching television to the point where it literally numbs us. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with watching a box set intentionally, but I'm talking about that hours and hours of day after day numbing out in front of television, or eating, numbing out through food, through alcohol, through drugs, through you can even numb out positively, really, and so through some things that we do. But it's when we constantly, and the way it even further shows up is where we don't speak up, we don't have a voice, we're not expressing our creative force, our creative energy. That is, often people sort of say, oh, I'm not creative, because we tend to think creativity is about painting something, being an amazing artist, or being able to design a quilt, or write a book. Creativity is your life force. It's always flowing through you, and it gets stuck in our bodies. And so we have to learn, and it gets stuck in the body through constant patterns or ways of thinking. It gets stuck through the fact that we're not moving and shifting our energy through movement, through yoga, through meditation, through all different ways that we could possibly express ourselves. And so consciousness, the way we think, becomes matter and density. And when we're really stuck, you tend to find that it's the lower parts of the body, the chakra system. I don't know if you know much about the chakra system.
Yes, I do, but for the benefit of the audience, it might be worth just giving a quick, simple explanation.
Yeah, so the chakras are they're sort of Sanskrit for your energy wheels. And there's actually 8, but there's 7 personal chakras, starting from your root chakra, which is, down in your sort of coccyx, and it goes up through your root. You've got your, I always never forget the second one. Then you've got, slip my mind, but then you've got your power center, which is, your solar plexus, and then you've got your heart, and you've got your throat, and you've got your 6th one is in your 3rd eye, and then you've got your crown chakra, and then there's an 8th chakra, which is actually sort of the consciousness between you and the divine. And so that's not your personal chakra, but there's like another one, and it's about the way the energy flows from up above, so from divine source above you, and then all the way down through to the earth, Mother Nature, and the earth below you. And what can happen, these chakras get blocked, and they literally it's very complicated. It's not complicated, but there's quite a lot about it. But really, the simplest way to put it is that, each chakra can represent different areas in your life. So for me, when I first started training as a psychotherapist, what actually got me into becoming a psychotherapist is I had constant laryngitis, and I was in my early 20s, and I had it like all the way through from about the age of 16 to I started training as a psychotherapist when I was 25. And what happened is I was reading this book called Women, Love, Sex and Addiction by a Dr. Charlotte Kazel, who wrote the book. She was a psychotherapist. And I was reading this book on one particular time when I had like really bad laryngitis. And in those days, you went to the bookshop and bought a book, And I was like, wow, this woman is talking about me, and it just rang so true, all these different things she was saying in this book. And it made me want to study as a psychotherapist. And through that training of sort of 6 years of therapy and everything, I've never ever had laryngitis ever again, because I learned to unblock my voice, my self-expression, my freedom. And so what can happen is we can have, in our energy body, because we are all energy, we've got, your energy body is way bigger than your physical body. And so what happens when we get blocked in these different areas, it's so that we can learn to bring out these different qualities within us that can help us to have a more fulfilled, conscious, expressive and creative life. And that is part of activating what I call your power and your radiance.
Wow. Yeah, I totally get it and understand what you're saying. So, like you say, we are, as humans and any living thing, when we look at, well, not just living things, but matter, in anything that is visible to us or even invisible to us, it's just pure energy, isn't it? So whether we're a living thing or whether we're solid matter,
it is
gas or anything in life,
absolutely.
When it comes to the, putting us all under a big microscope, we are all one thing, which is that energy, isn't it?
Yeah. And so you asked, how do people, so first of all is like, well, what is getting in the way? Yeah. So that was you asked the question, how do people become more powerful? How do they become more radiant? So one of the things that I sort of work with, there's a couple of sort of stages that you need to look at. And there are 4 areas. One is the emotional, your emotional, what I like to call like your emotional power center. So how you are looking to go inwards and keep coming back to your own inner center, as opposed to looking outside of yourself for love, approval, validation, acceptance, all these different types of things, which is what we're taught to do, because that's the way we're designed. That's the sort of way that we, as we evolve from childhood, we're dependent on others. We come in and we're looking for 100% love from our mother and 100% approval from our father. And there's no way you could have the best parents in the whole wide world and the almost perfect childhood. But at some point, your ego is going to create a separation, is going to because it's got to form its own identity. And in that moment of separation, it's going to give meaning to something, whether it's you dropped your ice cream and you think, oh no, I don't get what I want in life, So there's these little things that happen that then create our belief system, et cetera. And so one of the things you can start to look at is, well, where are you triggered in your life? Yeah. Because when we're triggered, when we have an emotional reaction to something or someone or to an external circumstance, that trigger, and in the emotional trigger, that is a moment of healing opportunity for you. And I use the word healing because the trigger represents something, a pattern in your past, in your consciousness, that is literally stuck in your consciousness. So you can like, with gentle, loving, compassion, inquiry, the idea is you have to break free from that sort of noise, from the story, and you step back and you say, okay, so what am I really upset about? What is the problem? Because what's happening is the power, you're losing it in the problem. You're losing your power. You're giving your power to the problem, okay, and the story about the problem. So one of the quickest things you can start to do is to sort of say, okay, I'm upset because of what? What's the problem? And like almost like you sort of, rather than, it doesn't have to be like a deep intro, like, go right the way down to the core of everything. But if you start to flesh out those things, what are the thoughts I'm having? What are the feelings? Well, who am I making wrong? How am I defining myself? How am I defining others in the world? What starts to happen is you start to see the story and how you're giving your power away to that problem, okay, that you perceive as the problem, okay?
Yeah.
And when you do that, what you can then do is go, okay, so what, if I'm thinking and feeling and making, like, literally making up this story about this, what result am I going to get? What's the impact of that in my life? And so, very often, I get this all the time. Clients come to me and they've got a repeating pattern, usually an argument or a problem in their relationship. And when they start to do this, they see how, they're defining themselves as powerless or not enough, or that, they're in competition with someone or something. Usually often the competition comes up a lot in relationships. And so the outcome is always creates distance rather than closeness, creates, a drain on energy. And so once you start to break free from the story, and if you do this on a daily basis for like a period of 14 days, you will see exactly where your story is. And then it comes to the point where, with all, and this is the thing, we have to take responsibility for the change that we need to make in our life. And often we don't want to take responsibility because we get stuck in archetypal patterns. And there's 4 main archetypes that are disempowering archetypes, and they're the archetypes of the child, the victim, the saboteur, and the prostitute. And this is work that Caroline Myss talks about in her books, etc., etc. So it's not my work that I've founded myself. And there's lots of books on our archetypes, but Caroline Myss talks about it really, really well. And if we really sort of take ownership and take responsibility for how we're showing up in our relationships, what you can do with this work is you can start to see which is the voice that's actually triggering you. And then you step into the illuminated archetypes, which are the power archetypes, which is like the sovereign, the magician, the warrior, and the lover. And when you use the sort of opposite archetypes, you start to embody the power of those. And then you start to really like make different choices, and you start to choose to respond as opposed to be in reaction to what's happened, but choose new responses. And, maybe that response is that you speak up. Maybe it is that you decide to leave a marriage that isn't working because, or maybe it's about you having healthy boundaries and setting those boundaries. But it's always about having, the thing that we spoke about, which stops people, is our resistance to change. It's about recognizing you have a choice because you are powerful. And the way you start embodying that choice, there's a number of different things, breath work, body work, kundalini, different types of yoga, meditation. So you've got that relationship with your higher self, and you have to actually start to actively choose to do different things, because only you can break away from the noise, the story, the beliefs, the assumptions, and the definitions. I've sort of summarized that very quite a lot in a short space of time. So feel free to ask a question.
Yeah, I'd like, if you would, to give us some sort of case study that would demonstrate what you're talking about. So if you've got sort of like, obviously not mentioning any names, but say, such as if you were the person that got this issue going on.
Yes.
Was having this story going on in their head, then, if you could give us a practice.
Yeah, sure.
With the audience.
Yeah, let me. So let me think of a particular client who came to me. She was 3 years into a divorce process. So she came to me and she was struggling hugely. And this was 3 years down the line. And it's an interesting thing that often people don't get professional help until they're quite the way down the divorce process, which is crazy because, if you broke your leg, you'd go and get it fixed as soon as possible, wouldn't you?
Yes.
But we don't seem to ask for psychological help because of various ideas about that. But anyway, so she came to me and she was referred from another client, and she was really stuck in the story of, so her husband had an affair, he'd moved out, he was now had been living with the woman for a good 2.5 years. They had 3 boys together, and she was at home raising the 3 boys, and it was really interesting. Her whole energy was of a victim. So she was stuck in this thinking of, I did something wrong, I should have been a better wife, I should have been a better, I didn't attend enough to his needs, and the other woman is, more attractive, more is younger than me, is etc. I've let myself go. And she was really stuck in this victim mindset, and at that point she probably would have, and if he'd have come back, she would have let him come back. And what was really, really interesting was when she found out initially about his affair, he said, obviously their sex life had sort of changed after having 3 children, and they'd got into sort of really the sort of monotony of life, and she really had actually taken on the role as a mother in the relationship. And you don't have sex with your mother. That's that whole energy, that vibration around sexual relationships, etc. But so that was where she was when she came. And through the coaching of her really beginning to look at, okay, where did I give my power away? What did I not take responsibility for in the relationship about my own needs and feelings? And what really happened in the relationship is that she took on the role of caregiver for everybody. And she had everything, she had no idea what she needed or what she wanted, or even how she, she wasn't able to express herself clearly in the relationship. And so what was happening is the whole relationship was about her getting her sense of worth and value through everybody needing her.
Yeah.
And because of that because of that, she was resentful. She was, to be honest, she even admits, she wouldn't admit when she first came, but she got to where she admitted that actually she was being quite dull and sort of that passive aggressive. There was a lot of resentment, and she recognized that she gave her power away because basically she became a doormat. And so if you are behaving like a doormat, then someone will literally walk all over you. And that's not saying that the other person was right in doing that. It's you unconsciously, she gave them permission. And so what was really interesting, and this is the bit, there is always, so what's happening in your relationships will be part of your childhood, sort of what happens as you grow up. And this woman actually had a lovely relationship. In fact, she had so much security in her family life that there was a particular thing that happened when she went off to university that triggered her massively, and she felt alone, unsafe and insecure, and she literally clung on, and the husband was her childhood sweetheart type thing, where they'd met at sixth form, and they'd had a 2-year relationship, and they'd both gone off to university. And what had happened was that the insecurity of university created an attachment, and a stronger attachment to the husband, who at the time was obviously the boyfriend. And there were things that were coming up in the relationship that she completely ignored. And it was because she wanted the safety and the attachment. And so marriage for her represented safety and attachment, and that bond. And it was so painful for her to the end of the marriage, because it's just something that she just didn't associate would ever happen in their family. And now, so she worked with me actually for about 9 months. She is in a completely different place. She's happily, I'd say she's actually very happily divorced. She's got a newfound confidence in herself. She's way more self-expressive. She ended up, she was in quite a sort of, a good career, but she wasn't really juicing her up. She didn't feel really excited. She changed her job. She's got much better, healthier boundaries, and she has a lot of more self-respect, and she's doing things that she loves. She's listening to herself and her own inner voice. And so, the relationship, the divorce, whilst it's painful and not what she would have wanted in her life, she sees it now as it was an opportunity for her really to get to know herself. And so any relationship she creates now is going to be very different from the type of relationship she had previously. And that's because she's in her power now. She's not going to, she's got different boundaries. And one of the, a real turning point with her was her asking for what she really wanted in the divorce process, and not settling and being bullied around by her previous husband.
So yeah, that's a great practical example, because I think all relationships, regardless of whether they're intimate relationships or not, teach us something, don't they, about what we're not seeing about ourselves or what needs healing within ourselves. And like you say,
yes,
for her, it was that she needs to look at what she allowing in terms of unacceptable behavior. In other words, him treating her like a doormat. And where she could take responsibility for that was to learn actually she was allowing that through not having high standards and boundaries, or that
exactly
esteem of, knowing her worth in that relationship.
Yeah. And getting her worth, like thinking her worth was in the relationship. Your worth is not defined by your relationships. You define your worth. And that, when you alter your relationship with yourself and you are living from that emotional power of your own self-value and self-worth, and, as you said, your highest value, then you attract and create people in your life. You co-create with life, and you attract different types of people who will, because you set the tone, don't you? I always remember my mum saying to me very, I was young, you're the one that sets that precedence in your relationship. And if you put up with that, if you let someone hit you, or if someone hits you and you go along with that, then they will hit you again, basically.
You treat people how to treat you.
Yeah, you show people how to treat you. Exactly. Yeah. And so, and that, you see, is, and it goes back to the thing, often we are afraid of our power. And that's because we might fall into that child, like, the child archetype says, is looking for permission from their partner to do things. How many women do you know who look to their partner to say, well, can I do this?
Yeah.
And men do it as well. I know men that say, oh, is it okay if I do this, or can I do this? And actually, if you're in a sovereign relationship where you come together to bring out the best of each other and to empower each other, and you have a shared vision for your life, there will be things that your partner will go off and do because that's part of their journey, and you're okay with that because you're not dependent on them for your own self-worth and value. And if there's trust, and there's trust, and etc., you have to, but a lot of relationships, if you're in a victim stance where, and this is an interesting one, a lot of people don't like it when you say this, but the prostitute archetype, because it's associated with women giving away sex, but so many women, and this has been traditional because of the fact that women could not earn their own money. Like when women were not allowed to have money. Back in, women had allowed to have bank accounts. They power was taken away from women, and we're seeing that turnaround of the rising of the feminine, etc., in the last sort of 20 years or whatever. But if you're in a relationship, or it can happen when you're in a job where you are doing work that you just does not light you up in any shape or form, or you're staying in a marriage because of the financial security, and you really don't believe that you can make it out there in the world on your own or with your children, what happens is you are, in a way, you're prostituting yourself. Your value and your worth is being traded for that financial security or that job security, etc., etc. And so many people are in these situations and they don't know how to get out of it. And, part of that is working first on your self-worth, even just acknowledging that you're in that situation and doing the inner work and starting to listen to that guidance. If you put your power in that, you will find like answers come to you. It's like the mist. You won't know exactly where it's going to go, but you will start taking small steps to building that. And then you'll come out of the mist, and before you know it, you've got a success story. I had a client once. She said one of the things was when she came to me, she was coming to me for relationship. She wanted to find a relationship, and I said to her, what's the real vision? Like, where do you sit? What else comes with this relationship? And it was like, well, I'd have a really big house, and I'd have this big, beautiful home, and I'd have a garden. And at the time, she had a 2-bedroom flat. It was a nice flat, but it was a 2-bedroom flat. And she wanted a house. She wanted a house that was a home and a garden. She didn't have a garden. And I said, well, really, what's stopping you from having that now, that home and that garden? She goes, I don't know. I think that I shouldn't have it until I have a man in my life, And so it's really interesting, So what happened was, she had a good career. She could afford a house, and so she started investigating this. And she bought her first home, which was actually it was like a 4-bedroom townhouse type thing. And she bought the house and she moved in, and then she met her partner. You see, because we're waiting for the thing that we think we need in order to have what we want. But very often what we want is available to us now. That was that sense of freedom. That was her in her empowerment of being able to create, and just the feeling of joy that she had from that. And when she was shifted and aligned with that bigger aspect of herself, and she expanded her radiance, her power, then look what she attracted. She attracted a relationship that was in alignment with that.
Yeah.
So it's I love it when those things happen.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've seen it in your own life. I've seen it in my life.
Certainly. And I think sometimes, and I know this goes for men as well as women, but certainly for women, because obviously we're considered, and you naturally are, that softer, nurturing energy. But I think sometimes we accept poor behavior because we're afraid of rocking the boat, aren't we? And actually what is more attractive to our partner is if sometimes you rock the boat and say, well, you know what, that wasn't acceptable, and they suddenly take notice of that, the fact that you've said that. And actually you are raised, they might not like it in the moment, but that you actually do raise your standard in their eyes if you challenge them in a nice way, not in an aggressive way, around something that might not be acceptable.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's way more sexy to challenge someone in a playful manner. Men like playfulness for starters, but if you can challenge a man in a playful way and be in your power around it, they will hear that very differently to, you whining about something or you going, the silent treatment, or, that used to be my thing I would do in the past. I'd do the silent treatment with someone. And, when I learned how to speak up and to actually have a voice and to playfully even sometimes communicate things. I had a client recently who, one of her things was she would always sleep with men really quickly when she got to know them. And what would happen is, oh, hold on. Sorry, Lynn, you might want to pause this bit.
No, it's okay. We can probably edit this bit out.
Okay, sorry, the door knocked and the dog. Okay, shh, test. Right, okay. So
just for the sake of authenticity.
Yeah, so what happens is this particular client, she came to me, she was always sleeping with men way too quickly. And then, of course, inevitably, she'd sleep with them quickly and then the man would disappear.
Yeah.
So we had to look up, one, why was she doing that? Why was she sleeping with men too quickly? And obviously she was in that prostitute archetype of trading her worth through sex, which a lot of people do, thinking that if I sleep with someone, then that means they love me, or they will love me, or they'll stay with me, or whatever. And she was really afraid of saying to a man that, no, that she wanted a man who was going to treasure her heart, and that she, only slept with, she would only sleep with men that once she had got to know them and knew that they, their word was their word, and who were also interested, wanted a committed relationship. And she was afraid of saying that because she thought that it would obviously limit her choice. Now, the interesting thing is, yes, it may limit your choice, but it means that the ones that are of a high quality that will stay around because they actually really value that. And they also, most men don't actually want a woman that sleeps around. No. It goes back to that the tribal, that hunter gatherer type thing in them. And it was really interesting because it was about her being in her power around her own value and worth, and trusting that she like really owning her value. And she hadn't been owning her value. And when she started doing this and saying no, she started attracting more men. And obviously then she met someone because she wasn't giving herself away so easily. And that's because she activated that part of her that loves herself and has a high standard. Now, I'm not saying that as a woman you cannot go out and consciously decide to have sex or have a one-night stand. Of course you can. If you want to do that, there's nothing wrong with that. But it's whether you're going into that one-night stand in your power and your authority, or whether you're going into that one-night stand with the mindset of you're hoping to get that person to fall in love with you through your whatever. Do you understand? There's a completely different energy about it, isn't there?
Yeah, because one comes from a place of desperation and the other one from a place of inspiration, is the way I put it.
Love it. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I'm totally with you there, Lynn. I love the way you put that.
Okay, well, unfortunately, we're coming to the end in terms of time for the podcast, and I've really enjoyed this conversation. I'm sure we could go on and talk in depth around more than other examples around, how to activate your power and radiance, but maybe we can do that on another episode. So
yeah, that would be lovely. It went so quickly.
So for the benefit of our audience, Maxine, could you give us your best contact information?
Yes, sure. I think the best thing is for people to go to my website, MaxineClancy.com, and on there's some free resources which they can download, whether they're going through divorce, breakup, or they just want to. There's a webinar they can listen to on how to fully activate your power and radiance. So yes, that's the best place for me.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. I've really enjoyed it, and I'm sure, as I say, you'll be a repeat guest on the podcast in terms of sharing your wisdom and knowledge around this very, very inspirational and very much needed subject of how to step into your power and radiance. So thank you very much for that, Maxine.
Thank you so much. It's been my absolute pleasure to be with you here today. Thanks, Lynn.
Okay, so it just leaves me to say, as I always do, true love starts with opening our hearts. And so until next time, goodbye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Hearts Entwined podcast. You can follow Lynn via the Facebook group Two Hearts Entwined, or search Lynn Smith, inspirational speaker, at LinkedIn, or email lynn@hearts-entwined.com. That's lyn@hearts-entwined.com. Remember, true love starts with opening our hearts.